Well, here's a topic I didn't think I was going to have to revisit anytime soon. Maybe you guys can help me out and give your 2 cents in the comments, like you weren't going to anyways. This is the question of the day. Do lifts, feats of strength, records count if they are done outside of a sanctioned competition? I first stumbled across this when I covered Thor's historic 501 deadlift, where he edged out Eddie Hall's 500 kilogram deadlift by 1 kilo. He did that last year during the shutdown. And I covered what I thought of the video, and what should have been a pretty bright spot in sports in an otherwise dim period of time actually turned into this shit show of internet controversy. And the big point of contention was whether or not anybody should recognize that lift. The people that dismiss it say it wasn't a competition, we shouldn't be caring about gym lifts, it was done at his own personal gym, so all of these factors were in his favor to make it easier, and we shouldn't compare these things. First of all, people misuse the word compare all the time. When you take two different things and people say, well, you can't compare them. You can compare anything. I can compare an elephant to an airplane. That's literally what the word compare means. You can always find analogous traits between everything and chart the differences. That's what it is to compare. You can't equate them. So the question is, can you equate lifts that happen in those circumstances with the ones that happen in sanctioned meets under different circumstances? I did the video on John Haack's ridiculous 903 deadlift. I did that yesterday, and then I had no idea. People had mentioned in the comments that he actually hit a 600-pound bench recently. So I saw that video. So comments piled up, and like clockwork, there were people expressing that it's a gym lift. So, it didn't happen in a meet. So not really worth talking about, or not as impressive, or let's put that to the side. Let's see what he could do in an actual show. Funny story, I actually I had to get a TV for my office when we moved in, and I took it upon myself to get a Black Friday deal. I usually treat myself to a video game when they're like 10 or 15 bucks at Target around Black Friday. And I don't play video games that often, but I had a bit of nostalgia. I decided to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I grew up in San Diego. Skating was everywhere. I hated skating. For some reason, I love that damn game. I mean, the game's like, 15, 20 years old? And they updated it. It's beautiful, and I'm playing the hell out of it. And I got thinking about Tony Hawk's 900. Tony Hawk, it was the first to hit a 900, and it took him 10 attempts to do it.
I think it was a conscious decision, like, okay, everybody stop skating, let Tony try and make this. We all just wanted to get behind him and see him do it.
Tony Hawk, Tony Hawk, Tony Hawk, 900, 900.
It's like the Bulgarian approach to skateboarding. Now, it took place at the X Games in 1999, but it was after regulation time. They were on such a high with what he was trying to do that they decided to give him more and more tries. They were riding the high of the crowd and the feat that he was trying to demonstrate. It was outside of the rules. Do people not count his 900 as anything because it fell out of what was regulation for the event that he was at?
Are you kidding me?
Like, absolutely not. It was one of the most talked about feats of the time. As I play it right now, they have it as one of his special moves, the 900, because that was such an iconic moment in sports. So when it comes to records, we're talking about the limit of human performance. That's what most people care about. So to have that extra qualifier mandated is kind of silly. But it started because, and I started lifting before, 99, 2000, before the internet really dominated our lives. Social media, YouTube wasn't a thing. Gym culture didn't look entirely different than it did now. There were still idiots, lifelong gym rats that were in their little bubble in the iron pit at your local 24-hour fitness gym. And they would ego lift, and they would try to impress each other, and they would try to, peacock by doing these garbage ego lifts that weren't set to any standardization. The easiest rebuttal to that is like, well, do it in a meet and see what happens. Then you'll see what happens when you have to lift the same as everyone else. You'll see how your garbage squat depth is. You'll see that you don't lock out your deadlifts, or that your half bench presses don't mean shit. And then that accelerated once Instagram took off, because you had that magnified. You had everybody filming their garbage lifts. So of course there was this huge pushback. And then as strength sports and powerlifting and strongman became more popular, there was a more vocal pushback saying the meets are where it's at, the standardization is where it's at. So in general lifting culture, where there's a lot of bullshit, that's very important. As these sports have taken off, what happens when these sports grow is they get taken over by a fan base. And it's funny because most of the people that are the most vocal are the lowest on the experience and authority chart. Hey, that's what growing the sport does. You get propped up by a sea of fans who are very high on opinions and very low on experience. So to everybody who's been pushing grow the sport for the last decade, thanks. Most of the people I know that have been around for a long time have this fond memory of back in the day when the sports were filled with just freaks, because We were the sideshow. You had to go out of your way to compete. It was some dirtbags in their garage lifting stones, or nobody really knew the difference between like powerlifting and Olympic lifting. So the opinions were invariably going to come from people that had that skin in the game. Now it's really not any different than your drunk uncle who yells at the TV during the Super Bowl because he played a couple rounds in high school. He somehow knows something that the coach who gets paid millions of dollars to run the best athletes in the world does not. Now, I'm only pointing to that phenomenon because I really think that's what's driving this narrative, that things have to happen in competition for them to mean anything. I think you have to live in kind of a competition bubble to think that's the case. The thing is, I love strength sports. I don't regularly watch powerlifting. I haven't watched World's Strongest Man in probably 6 or 7 years. What I keep my ear to the ground for are the impressive standout events. You hear about those and then you go seek them out. And a lot of that is what people are doing in their training. Part of what makes being a sports fan fun is the comparison. It's the fact that we have so many different things to evaluate, look at, and compare. A lot of it is playing the what if game. What if we took this person in this circumstance, put them in a different circumstance? How would they do? That's much of the discussion, and I really enjoy that. You can say that, well, it's harder to do it in a competition, therefore we shouldn't compare anything else. And I would actually take issue with that, especially with the best around. I mean, if we're talking about what it is to peak, if you know how to peak, that means you know that your general training has you at very high levels of fatigue, because you need high levels of fatigue in order to stimulate growth. An advanced lifter cannot go in at any given day and hit an all-time PR. There's a lot more thought that has to go into like recovery and balancing your workouts, and generally fatigue is too high to do that. For a peak, that means you are taking a dedicated period of time to peel that fatigue away so that you can actually demonstrate a true peak and show what your true capabilities are. And it's a very temporary, fleeting period of time, because it's a paradox. If you're training hard enough to get stronger, you're too fatigued to demonstrate that you're stronger. So you have to peel that fatigue away in order to actually hit that peak, which means if you're advanced and you know what you're doing, you're actually best off when you can plan for a meet and hit that peak just right. And veteran lifters know exactly how to do that. Then there's things like contest adrenaline. Then there's things like biased judging. I mean, sometimes people get bad beats. I've seen people get pretty generous beats when they're a favorite and they're about to do something big. Watch John Haack's 600-pound bench press, right? Now, most people would call that a touch and go bench. I'd be inclined to agree. It looked about like one of Eric Spato's bench records. I think it's 716 he hit, or a 721 he hit when he had the bench record for a brief period of time. It was about that quick. You can't be a good lifter unless you really know how to optimize your performance the day of the meet. So I don't really see that as being a substantial enough difference to like separate these feats out. I just want to know that they're standardized and they're the same. And when somebody asks, hey, what's the most freakish lift you've ever seen? I'm going to say it's John Haack's 903 deadlift as a 90 kilogram lifter. What about his body weight? He didn't weigh in. That's fair. John actually made an appearance to comment on the video I put out, and somebody asked him how much he weighed. He said 215. I'm inclined to believe him. Now, the thing is, most 90 kilogram competitors are much heavier. I stayed at the same hotel as Mark Jones, who took third at Strongman Corp Nationals this year in the 231s, became a pro, then immediately went to compete at Worlds in the 90 kilogram class. When I was talking to him, we were scouting out the pool area to see if there was a sauna or if the hot tub was hot enough to sweat. He's over 6 feet, and I'm like, dude, you look like you're pretty close to 231. You don't have that much weight to cut. He's like, nah, man, I'm cutting to 90 kilos. Most of the guys that cut to 198 walk around at 230, 235. A lot of them do anyway. I hate to break it to you guys, but John could probably compete in the 181. That gap in weight, it is not uncommon for guys to make that up. In MMA, it's extremely common. But even in powerlifting, when guys are really trying to take those weight class records, that type of cut is pretty standard. I mean, if he's 215, a week of water loading and cutting carbs is probably going to get him right around 200 pounds. Then you're looking at 19 or so pounds to cut just through sweating. That's a pretty normal run for somebody who's really trying to dominate the upper echelon of their weight class. And it's just to show that we can have this discussion, and you can talk about the asterisks, the exceptions, the comparisons, why it's the same, why it's not. But it's not always a given that something happening outside of a competition is more or less impressive than what happens in a competition, which is why we need the nuance in the discussion. Here's the thing, I love competition. I think competition should be held in the highest regard. But competition in a sport that requires other people to be present is a lot different than competition where you can rank yourselves against everybody else in the world, not just now, but across all time. I mean, the fact of powerlifting is that most people go and compete in empty divisions anyways, and they're chasing state records or national records from people that weren't even there. I mean, shit, if all of our kids' education can take place in front of a laptop, I see no reason why we can't decentralize lifting. I mean, video review is often better than what the judges put up anyways. Take, for example, Lasha, Olympic weightlifter. He's an absolute freak. He's blowing through all the records. Now, Lasha stands out because of the ease with which he lifts these world record weights. But he's only breaking these records by a very small margin. Most people accept that he has a bit more, but his biggest clean and jerk in training was right around the order of 600 pounds, more than anybody has ever done in a competition. And it wasn't easy. Now, to put that in perspective, Anatoly Pisarenko, and we're talking back in, I think, the 70s, was rumored to have hit a 600-pound clean and jerk in training. Pisarenko walked around at 265 pounds, where Lasha is a giant, and he looks like he's on the high end of the 300s. So the next time a casual recreational fan starts to chime in about how, well, it wasn't done on the platform, bro, so it doesn't mean anything, I want you to think about what people talk about when they talk about the limits of human performance. In the face of such a disparity, you already have the idea of the GOAT in your head, and then you see something that just blows that out of the water. Would people be justified in saying that that is one of the most impressive things in the history of strength sports, given the fact that it occurred? Or would they be doing what they do today, which is dismissing some of the most insane, rare, difficult feats in the history of mankind because it didn't happen in the exact circumstances that they wanted it to? So I get the fact that standardization is incredibly important. The more that we decentralize competition, that becomes a question, and you can bring in more doubt based on how legit you think things are or are not. Like, that makes absolute sense to me. But we live in a time where things can take place anywhere. They can be captured on camera. They can be verified 10 ways from Sunday. And to expose ourselves to all of the limits of human achievement in a way that we never were able to do before, and then see how it influences people so the talent pool grows. We're going to see more and more and more freak shit. And I think that's what's exciting. If you like competing, if you like showing up on meet day, that's good for you. I mean, the medal and the prize money and the title in the record books goes to you. But when it comes to a general discussion of what human beings are capable of and where the benchmark is, we're never going to disregard what the best in the world do, whether it's on the platform or on just a really good training day. So that's my 2 cents on that. Let me know what you guys think. Go ahead and leave your comments, your dissent, your hate mail in the comments section. Go ahead and check out Patreon. Superior Deadlift is on Amazon or at the Empire Barbell store. Links in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.